At the gala, the little girl reprieved 4 Japanese men, then struck the plate before he ate. The air was thick with the scent of blooming roses and fresh fruits, mingling with the soft murmur of conversations and the quiet clinking of fine china. Nobles, lords, and ladies, all draped in their finest attire, moved gracefully across the marble floors, lost in the revelry of the evening. The gala was a tradition, a celebration of the ancient bloodlines and power that controlled the realm. But in the far corner of the hall, away from the revelry and whispers of power, stood a figure who did not belong. A little girl. She was small, no more than 8 years old, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around her shoulders. Her eyes were sharp and alert, a contrast to the innocent face that would have suggested youth. She wore a simple, yet elegant gown made of deep blue silk, but the color did nothing to mask the unusual stillness around her. She seemed out of place, like a ghost among the living. Her name was Elara. Elara had no family here. She was neither noble nor commoner. She had appeared at the castle's gates one cold winter's night, brought in by the whispers of an old seer who spoke of her unusual gifts. The king, intrigued by the talk of her abilities, had agreed to let her attend the gala, though none of the guests knew the true reason for her presence. Few understood her gift, but Elara was known to have an extraordinary ability, the ability to read lips, to see truths in the words of others even when spoken quietly or from afar. Tonight, however, she was not concerned with the whispers or conversations that passed through the room. Her gaze was fixed on a group of men standing by the grand fireplace. There were 4 of them, strangers to the castle, yet they seemed as though they belonged in the very heart of the royal court. Their dark cloaks shimmered in the dim light, the fabric almost alive with an unsettling aura. They were not from this land. One of them, a tall man with sharp features and a distant look in his dark eyes, spoke briefly to the others. His voice, low and steady, sent ripples through the crowd. Alara's lips barely moved as she began to read his words, his every syllable etched in her mind as clearly as if spoken aloud. "Do not let her see the mirror," he muttered, just out of earshot of the other guests. His companions nodded, though their expressions were unreadable. They spoke little, but their gestures were enough to tell Elara that their mission was far from innocent. The girl's brow furrowed. There was something familiar about them, something that tugged at the back of her mind, but the words she read held more weight. She could feel the darkness of their intentions, a curse hanging over them that made the air thick with danger. Her hands, small and delicate, clenched into fists by her sides. The plate of food before her, untouched, suddenly seemed to grow heavy in her hands. She was not a child like the others who danced and whispered secrets under the high windows. Elara had no time for such distractions. She could see through them all, every face hiding a story, every word carrying weight. As she focused more intently, the voices of the men grew louder in her mind. "You must take the relic tonight," the tall man said to his companions. "The curse has been set in motion. We cannot wait longer." "But it is too dangerous," a voice answered. This man, unlike the others, was softer, his tone hesitant. "What if she knows? What if she senses the truth?" The tall man did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted to the others in the room. For a moment his eyes locked with Alara's, and she felt a chill run through her. He saw her. He knew she was watching. The girl's heart pounded in her chest and her lips parted slightly, but she made no sound. She wasn't afraid, not of him, not of any of them. She was simply a child, but one with a mind sharper than most. A mind that could see the world as it truly was, not as it appeared. She read the man's lips once more, catching the final words he spoke. "Her presence is an inconvenience," he said, his voice low just for himself. "But it cannot be helped. We must proceed." Alara's eyes narrowed. An inconvenience. Before she could process any more, she felt an overwhelming urge. Her hand shot out, and with a surprising strength, she slammed it down onto the plate in front of her. The porcelain cracked with a sharp noise, the sound reverberating through the hall. Guests nearby turned, startled by the sudden outburst. The clattering of the plate was the only sound that seemed to break the spell of silence. All eyes were on her now. Alara's gaze stayed fixed on the four men, particularly the tall one who had spoken. He froze, his eyes locking onto hers as if caught in an invisible web. The room around them seemed to disappear, the music fading into a dull hum, the guests' murmurs quieting into nothing. The tall man took a slow, deliberate step toward her, his eyes dark with something Alara couldn't yet name. "What are you doing, child?" he asked softly, though his voice held a quiet warning. His tone was measured, but beneath it lay a trace of anger, perhaps even fear. But Alara, unbothered by the attention, merely tilted her head slightly to one side. Her eyes, unreadable, fixed on the man. She had seen him for what he truly was. She could feel the weight of his purpose in this place, and it was not one of goodwill. "I can see you," Alara said, her voice soft but clear. The words struck the man like a blade. The tall man did not react immediately. His companions behind him, who had remained silent up until now, exchanged quick glances. One of them, a shorter figure with a scar running across his cheek, stepped forward, his hand reaching for the sword at his side. But the tall man raised a hand, stopping him. His focus remained on Alara. "You shouldn't be here," he muttered, more to himself than to her. But Alara was not frightened. She had seen things that were far darker than the men standing before her. She knew things, and she wasn't about to let them get away with whatever scheme they had set in motion. The girl could feel it in the air, the curse that lingered over these men, the danger they brought. The silence between them grew heavy. It was as if the world had paused, waiting for something to happen. The tall man and Alara stood locked in a battle of wills, one too powerful to be won by words alone. Finally, with a quiet nod, the man turned away. His companions followed without a word, but Alara did not look away. She kept her gaze on them, her small form rigid with resolve. As they retreated to the far side of the hall, she could still hear their murmurs. She read the man's lips once more, catching the last of his thoughts before he disappeared from view. "She knows too much." Alara stood alone in the middle of the hall, her heart racing. She did not understand everything, but she understood enough. There was something dangerous here, something that would soon come to a head. And she, whether she liked it or not, was at the center of it. Cliffhanger. She only hoped she could make sense of it before it was too late. The night passed in a blur of whispers and stolen glances. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something dark and powerful was swirling just beneath the surface of the gala. Though the grand hall had returned to its lively rhythm, with the laughter of nobles and the music of the orchestra filling the air, Alara's mind was miles away. She had seen the truth in those men's eyes. They weren't simply guests at the gala. They were part of something much larger, something dangerous. The moment she had struck the plate before the man could eat, Alara had felt a shift, a ripple in the fabric of reality itself. Something in the air had changed, like a storm gathering on the horizon. It wasn't just the man's anger that had unsettled her. It was his fear. She knew that her powers, her gift, were growing stronger, but this was different. It was as if she could feel the very essence of the curse that hung over them, a dark weight that pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. The following morning, the castle was bathed in the soft golden light of dawn, but Alara felt no comfort from it. She wandered through the halls alone, her small feet padding quietly over the marble floors. The servants were busy preparing for the next event, their faces calm and routine, but Alara could sense the tension in the air. Something was coming. The men from the gala had not returned, but Alara could feel their presence lingering in the castle. She didn't know why they had left so quickly, but she was certain they hadn't finished what they had come to do. The strange man, Kazuki, she remembered hearing someone call him, had looked at her with a mixture of disdain and something else. Something softer, a glimmer of hesitation that didn't quite belong. Curiosity gnawed at her as she walked toward the library, a vast room filled with towering shelves of books, some ancient, others more modern. She had always found solace in the written word, though she never read the books like others did. She simply touched the pages, felt the words, and let them speak to her. As she entered the library, she was met with a familiar face, Adeline, the castle's librarian. The older woman was sitting by a large window, her spectacles perched on her nose as she sorted through a stack of scrolls. "Good morning, Elara," Adeline greeted her with a warm smile, though her eyes held a hint of worry. "You're up early today." Was the gala as exciting as everyone says? Elara only nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. She walked to one of the shelves and ran her fingers over the spines of the books. There was a strange, magnetic pull toward a particular book, a thick tome bound in deep red leather. As her fingers brushed against it, a low hum seemed to vibrate through her skin. "What is this book?" she asked, more to herself than to Adeline. Adeline looked up, surprised. "Ah, that one. It's a rare find indeed. We've only just acquired it. It's said to hold the knowledge of ancient curses and rituals. We don't know much about it, but some of the royal scholars have been studying it." Elara didn't need to hear more. She reached for the book and opened it, letting the pages fall where they may. As her eyes scanned the text, words flashed before her. She could see them, feel them in her very being. The book was alive with power, its magic calling to her. The words seemed to twist and shift as she read, drawing her deeper into their secrets. The mirror of souls. The cursed path. The price of redemption. Elara's breath caught in her throat. The words on the page were familiar. She had heard them spoken by Kazuki and his companions the night before. This was no coincidence. Her gift, her ability to read lips, had connected her to something far beyond her understanding. "Do you understand what this means?" Adeline asked, her voice trembling. She had noticed Elara's sudden change in demeanor. "What you're reading, it's not for children." Elara closed the book with a quiet thud, her mind racing. She couldn't let the librarian know what she had seen, what she had read in those pages. The world of curses, mirrors, and ancient powers was not a place for someone like her, but she could not deny the pull. She had already stepped into a world that she couldn't walk away from. Before she could speak, there was a soft knock at the door. "Elara," came a voice, deep and steady. "Kazuki." His presence filled the room, his figure framed by the doorway. He stepped in, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. His eyes met hers, and for the briefest moment the air between them crackled with tension. Adeline stood and curtsied. "My lord," she said, her voice respectful but filled with a hint of unease. "Can I help you?" Kazuki nodded slightly, his gaze never leaving Elara. "I've come to speak with the girl. Alone." The librarian hesitated but gave a small nod, excusing herself with a glance at Elara that said she knew something was wrong. Elara barely noticed, her focus locked on Kazuki. She had so many questions, so many things she needed to understand. Kazuki shut the door behind him and stepped toward her. His movements were fluid, like a shadow moving through the room. "Elara," he began, his voice softer than it had been the night before. "I owe you an apology." Elara raised an eyebrow but said nothing. His words seemed odd. He owed her an apology. After the way he had looked at her in the gala, after the coldness in his eyes. She didn't trust him, not fully, but she wasn't sure she needed to. There was something about him that called to her, something buried beneath the layers of his guarded exterior. "I didn't mean to frighten you last night," Kazuki continued. "I know you felt the power in the room. You're more perceptive than most." Elara crossed her arms, her stance defiant. "What are you here for?" Kazuki's lips twitched in what might have been a smile, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You're not like the others. You see things that others miss, and I think you know more than you're letting on." Elara's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" Kazuki took a step closer, his eyes dark and intense. "I know you've been reading things you shouldn't, that book. It's not just a story, it's real, and it's dangerous. Alara felt a strange pull in her chest, a deep sense of recognition. She had known it all along. The book, the mirror, the curse, it was all connected to her, to them. "I'm not afraid of danger," Alara said quietly, her voice strong despite the fear bubbling within her. Kazuki studied her for a long moment. Then, to her surprise, he nodded slowly. "You shouldn't be, but you should understand the cost. The curse that we've all been bound to is one that can't be broken easily." She met his gaze, unflinching. "Then why are you here?" Kazuki's eyes softened for a fraction of a second. "Because I believe you might be the key to ending it. But the question is, can you trust me?" Alara didn't answer immediately. The weight of his words hung in the air between them. She had seen the darkness in his eyes, the burden he carried, and yet something about him felt familiar. "I don't trust easily," Alara finally replied. Kazuki nodded as if he had expected that answer. "I didn't think you would. But you will have to trust me if you want to break the curse." And with that, the room fell into an uneasy silence. Cliffhanger. Alara stood on the edge of a choice she hadn't yet made, the weight of Kazuki's words pressing down on her like a storm. Trust him, or turn away. The answer, she knew, would change everything. And she wasn't sure she was ready for that. The days that followed were thick with uncertainty. The castle had settled back into its usual rhythm. But the weight of the night at the gala, the whispered words and Kazuki's confession hung in the air like an invisible storm. Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her, though she didn't fully understand what it was. Her powers had always been a part of her, but now they seemed to reach further into places she hadn't known existed. It was as if a door had opened, and beyond it lay a world she wasn't yet ready to face. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw flashes, images of dark rooms, twisted mirrors, and a figure standing in shadows, waiting for her. And at the center of it all, there was Kazuki. His presence was a constant pull, a thread she couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Alara spent the next few days wandering the castle in silence, avoiding the bustling gatherings and the curious stares of the court. She didn't want to be a part of their world. She didn't even understand it. She only wanted answers, but answers were hard to come by. One afternoon, while walking through the gardens, Alara found herself alone beneath an old willow tree, its long branches sweeping the ground like gentle hands. The breeze was soft, carrying with it the scent of jasmine and lavender, but Alara's thoughts were far from peaceful. She had been reading more from the cursed book, searching for any clue that would explain the strange visions that had begun to haunt her. But the words only made her more confused. The book spoke of a mirror, the mirror of souls, and of choices that could shatter fate itself. But it was vague, like a riddle with no answer. She had only one choice left. Looking for something, Alara. The voice broke through her thoughts, and Alara turned to see Kazuki standing a few steps away, his cloak flowing like a shadow behind him. His eyes met hers, his expression unreadable. "Why do you keep following me?" Alara asked, her voice sharp. "I told you before I don't trust you." Kazuki didn't flinch at her words. He stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. "I'm not here to earn your trust, Alara. I'm here because we don't have much time." Alara's heart skipped a beat. "Time for what?" Kazuki paused, his eyes dark with something she couldn't quite place. "The curse is not something that can be broken easily. There are forces at work here, things far older than either of us. You felt it, haven't you? The pull, the weight of it." Alara didn't answer immediately. She had felt it, yes. Every time she read the book, every time she saw Kazuki, that same sense of inevitability wrapped itself around her, tighter and tighter. The curse was real, and it was waiting for her to make a choice. "You need to understand," Kazuki continued, his voice softening slightly. "The men you saw at the gala, they're part of a secret order. They've been searching for the mirror of souls for centuries, and they won't stop until they find it. And when they do, everything will change." Alara's brow furrowed. "And you're part of this order." Kazuki nodded, though the motion was hesitant. I was, yes, but things have changed. I've seen the consequences of their greed. The curse they seek to control is one that will destroy everything if it's not stopped. And you're the key, Alara. Her pulse quickened at his words. What do you mean I'm the key? Kazuki stepped closer, his eyes locked onto hers. The mirror doesn't just show the truth, it shows what lies within a person's soul. Those who look into it are forced to confront their deepest desires, their greatest regrets. The mirror holds the power to change fate, but it also holds the power to destroy everything if it falls into the wrong hands. Alara took a step back, her mind racing. So you're saying that I'm supposed to stop them? By what, staring into this mirror and hoping it solves everything? Kazuki's expression softened, and for the first time, Alara saw the weight of his own guilt in his eyes. I know this is hard to understand. I've made mistakes, Alara. I've seen the consequences of what happens when the mirror is used wrongly, but you're the only one who can stop it. The wind shifted, sending a cold gust through the garden. Alara wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the chill seep into her bones. I don't understand. I'm just a child. What can I possibly do? Kazuki's gaze softened further, and for a moment she could see the sadness in his eyes. You're not just a child. You have power, Alara. A power I can't explain. You've already seen things others can't. You know things that I've been searching for my entire life. Alara looked away, her heart pounding. The power within her was both a gift and a burden. She didn't want it. She didn't want to be the one to stop the curse. She didn't want to be the one who had to choose between saving the world or losing everything. But deep down, she knew that Kazuki was right. She was the key. And what about you? Alara asked, her voice trembling slightly. What's your part in this? You say you're trying to stop the curse, but I don't trust you. How do I know you're not just using me for your own purposes? Kazuki's eyes darkened at her words, but there was no anger in them. Instead, there was a deep sorrow. I've been a fool, he admitted. I thought I could control it, control the curse, control my fate, but I was wrong. I'm here because I believe in you, Alara. You're the only one who can break this, but the path you walk will not be easy. You'll face choices that will tear you apart. Alara stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for any hint of deception. But all she saw was a man broken by his own mistakes, a man who had lost everything in his quest for redemption. And for the first time, she believed him. I don't know if I'm ready, Alara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Kazuki nodded slowly, understanding. None of us are ever ready, but sometimes we don't get to choose, we only get to act. Alara stood in silence, the weight of his words settling over her like a heavy cloak. She could feel the pull of the curse, the way it twisted at the edges of her thoughts, trying to draw her into its web. And she could feel the growing bond between her and Kazuki, the way his burden had become hers, whether she wanted it or not. You'll have to make a choice soon, Alara, Kazuki said, his voice low. A choice that will change everything. Cliffhanger. As Kazuki turned to leave, his steps echoing in the silence of the garden, Alara felt a sharp pang in her chest. The choice was coming. And when it came, there would be no turning back. The days grew colder as Alara faced the inevitable truth. The choice she had been avoiding was drawing nearer. Every moment, every breath, seemed to carry with it the weight of the decision that hung over her like a storm cloud. Kazuki had spoken the words, she was the key, and the time to act was almost upon them. But she didn't feel like the key. She felt like a child, lost in a world she could barely understand. It wasn't just the curse that troubled her, though that was a constant ache in her chest. It was the people who had become a part of her story, the men from the Gala, the shadowy figures who moved like ghosts behind the scenes. The mirror of souls, the book that seemed to hold more than it let on, and the curse that threatened to destroy everything. And Kazuki, the man who had become more than just a stranger, more than an ally. He had become a part of her journey, and she couldn't deny the growing bond between them, a bond that seemed to pull her closer to him with each passing day. Alara didn't know how to navigate this new world of power and ancient forces. She didn't know how to stop the curse or how to use the mirror to change fate. All she knew was that the darkness was coming, and it was bringing something far worse than she could imagine. On the morning of the final confrontation, Alara stood alone in the garden, her small hands clenched tightly at her sides. The wind whipped around her, carrying with it the scent of rain. The storm she had felt for so long was finally here. She could feel it in her bones. Kazuki had left her with little more than a vague promise the night before. You will make the choice. You will choose the future. The future. What future? Her mind was a tangle of confusion. But as she stood there, staring out at the horizon, she knew that whatever happened next, it was no longer just about her. The sound of footsteps behind her broke the silence. Alara turned to find Kazuki standing a few paces away, his cloak billowing in the wind, his face shadowed by the early morning light. "Alara," he said, his voice low but firm. "It's time." She didn't speak at first, simply watching him with eyes that had seen too much too quickly. She felt the weight of the decision pressing on her chest, threatening to suffocate her. "What if I can't do it?" she asked quietly, her voice barely a whisper. Kazuki's gaze softened, and for the briefest moment she saw the man beneath the hardened exterior. The man who had carried the weight of 1,000 regrets, the man who had made countless mistakes, but who was still standing before her, offering her a chance. "You don't have to do it alone," he said. "I'll be with you every step of the way, but you have to trust yourself. The mirror won't show you what you want to see, it will show you what you need to see." Alara closed her eyes, the weight of his words sinking in. She wasn't sure she was ready for this. She wasn't sure she could bear the burden of the future. But what choice did she have? The curse would destroy everything. The men from the Gala would stop at nothing to seize the mirror and use its power to control fate. And if they succeeded, the world as she knew it would cease to exist. "I don't know if I can face it," Alara said, her voice trembling. "What if I can't handle what the mirror shows me?" Kazuki stepped closer, his presence a steadying force. "You won't be alone. I'll be right there with you, but you must look into the mirror, you must see the truth." Alara nodded slowly, her heart heavy in her chest. It was time. The mirror would reveal the path she had to take, the path that would determine everything. With a final glance at Kazuki, Alara turned and walked toward the hidden chamber beneath the castle, the place where the mirror was kept, shrouded in darkness. It was there that the final choice would be made. The journey down the winding staircase felt like an eternity. The cold stone walls seemed to close in around her, the air growing heavier with each step. Kazuki walked beside her, his silence a reminder of the gravity of what was about to happen. There was no turning back now. At the bottom of the stairs, they entered a dimly lit room. The mirror stood at the far end, its surface dark and still, like a pool of water that had not been disturbed for centuries. The room was silent, save for the sound of their footsteps echoing in the stillness. Alara approached the mirror slowly, her breath catching in her throat. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. The frame was made of dark, twisted metal, etched with symbols that seemed to shift and change with the light. The surface of the mirror was like a living thing, its depths shifting like a stormy sea, constantly moving. Kazuki stopped beside her, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "Look into the mirror, see what you must." Alara took a deep breath and stepped closer to the mirror. She could feel its power pulling at her, urging her to look. Slowly, cautiously, she raised her eyes to the surface. At first there was nothing, just darkness as if the mirror itself were a void. But then, slowly, images began to form. At first they were hazy, like mist rising from the ground. Alara saw flashes, visions of people, of places, of things she couldn't understand. Her heart raced and her breath quickened as the images began to grow clearer. She saw herself standing alone in a dark forest, surrounded by shadows. But in the shadows there were eyes that watched her, waiting for her to make a move. And then she saw Kazuki. He was standing beside her, but he was different. His face was older, more worn, as if time had taken its toll on him. "Alara," he said in the vision, his voice strained. "You have to choose." The scene shifted again, and Alara saw a different version of herself. This time she was not alone. She was standing in a room filled with people, men and women, all of them watching her, waiting for her to make a decision. But the room was dark, the air thick with tension. The curse was rising and there was no escape. "Alara," Kazuki's voice came again, but this time it was not just a voice. She saw him reaching out to her, his hand stretched toward her, but she could not reach him. "You are the only one who can stop it." Tears welled in Alara's eyes as the visions continued to shift and change. She saw the world burning, the sky black with smoke. She saw the faces of people she loved, people she didn't even know, all torn apart by the curse. The mirror showed her everything, every fear, every regret, every choice that had led her to this moment. And then she saw the truth, the choice she had to make. Alara closed her eyes, taking a shaky breath. She could feel the power of the mirror pushing at her, urging her to act. She knew what she had to do. The curse could not be allowed to consume the world. She could not let it destroy everything she had fought for. She had to make the sacrifice. "Alara," Kazuki's voice was soft but firm. "It's time." She opened her eyes and looked into the mirror once more. This time there was no fear, only clarity. The path was clear. The choice was hers. Without hesitation, Alara stepped forward, her hand reaching out to the mirror. She knew that in doing so, she would change everything. But she also knew that it was the only way to save the world. Cliffhanger. The moment Alara's fingers touched the surface of the mirror, a wave of energy surged through her. The world around her began to spin, the images shifting faster and faster until everything went dark. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't see. And then everything went still. Had she made the right choice? Had she chosen the right path? The answer would come, but it would not be easy.